This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. I just recently did a podcast comparing liquid chlorine to trichlor, so I'm going to compare liquid chlorine to Hypo. These are two primary shocks you can use for a pool, and they're also something you can use to help keep the free chlorine level stable all week long. And I'll compare these two products together so you can make an educated choice of which one may be best for you. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy coaching program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support. From me, I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. The good news for each of these chlorine types is that both of them are considered unstabilized chlorine. They don't contain any cyanuric acid in them. So that's a good thing. The byproduct of liquid chlorine, the chemical name is sodium hypochlorite, and so the byproduct is salt. And the byproduct of Hypo, calcium hypochlorite, is calcium. So it's going to be adding some calcium to the pool water, a small amount, part per million amount of calcium to the water as you're using it. Just note that every chlorine type has a byproduct, whether it's liquid chlorine, Hypo, dichlor, trichlor. There's something that's going to be added to the water as a byproduct. Everything in nature has a byproduct. You eat food, you have a byproduct. You have a car, a gasoline combustion engine. The byproduct, of course, is the emissions. And so all of that is to say that there is really no product without a byproduct. The byproduct is going directly into the pool, of course, in this case. So when you're adding liquid chlorine, you're adding salt to the pool. When you're adding Hypo, you're adding calcium to the pool. And that's the main byproduct of each. Neither of them add cyanuric acid to the pool. So these are a great way to offset the use of trichlor tablets. If you're using trichlor tablets in the pool, they're adding cyanuric acid to the pool at sometimes an astronomical level. Your pool can get to it. Your pool can get to an astronomical level as far as cyanuric acid if you're just using trichlor tablets only without using any Hypo or liquid chlorine to supplement that. Just as liquid chlorine comes in different strengths, 6%, 10%, 12.5%, Hypo also comes in different strengths as well. You're going to find a lot of different Hypo out there. There was some Hypo that was out there that was really cheap. It was like $99 for a bucket or somewhere around there. It was like $149. It was like super cheap for a 50-pound bucket, but that was like really low Hypo. I think it was below 65%. And this percentage of Hypo, typically you're going to have 65 to 68% for the residential use. Like if at Home Depot and Walmart, you're going to find Hypo shock. It'll probably be about 65 or 68%. And then, of course, if you go to a pool store and if you're a professional pool service, if you're a pool service professional, I should say, your supplier should carry 70 to 73% Hypo. Just note, the higher the percentage of Hypo, the more volatile it is, or the more it could have potential problems. Hypo is one chemical that you don't want to mix with trichlor. There is a pretty explosive reaction if you mix Hypo and trichlor together. That's why if you're using the Hypo tablets, you never want to put those in a inline trichlor feeder because you could have an explosive reaction. Nor would you want to have trichlor tablets in the skimmer and then pour a bag of Hypo shock over it. the skimmer lid is probably going to explode off of there, and it's a pretty explosive reaction. So you want to make sure that you use this safely and don't mix Cal Hypo with any other chlorine type. It can be very volatile. At the higher concentration levels, heat is very, very, very reactive to it, so be careful with the higher percentage of Cal Hypo, and don't store it anywhere where it could catch on fire. And potentially, I've heard different stories of, it getting really hot outside and it being wet, or even sweat dripping into a bucket and catching on fire, but that's pretty rare for that to happen, even at the higher percentage. So the lower percentage is safer, higher percentage is a bit more volatile over the lower percentage of Cal Hypo. And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description. How does it compare in strength to liquid chlorine? Well, we use a 12.5% liquid chlorine here in my area. Most of Florida, they can also get 12.5% jugs of the chlorine. And to compare it to the Cal Hypo, to raise your free chlorine level in the pool in a 10,000 gallon body of water by 1 part per million, you would need 10.2 ounces, or 1 1/4 cup of liquid chlorine, 12.5%. And if you're using 60% Cal Hypo, you would need 1.5 ounces by weight. So on paper, Cal Hypo does seem to be a little stronger than liquid chlorine if you do a liquid measurement compared to a dry measurement. But in practicality, when you're using it out there as a shock, they're about the same as far as using 1 pound of Cal Hypo and 1 gallon of liquid chlorine in a pool based on how many ounces you're going to need to add to bring the chlorine level up in the pool. So there's not a huge difference in the strength of Cal Hypo over liquid chlorine. Now, there are some drawbacks with liquid chlorine over Cal Hypo, of course, and that is that Cal Hypo, when you're adding it as a shock, is in a powdered form, and this could cloud the pool water up pretty rapidly. This is an effect that happens to Cal Hypo when you're adding it to the pool, and it could make the water very milky. Whereas liquid chlorine, when you're adding it to the pool, it really won't affect the clarity of the pool water, and you're going to have pretty much no effect on the clarity of the water. And with the Cal Hypo, you're going to have that cloudiness that could happen. Also, as far as pool surface types, you really want to use liquid chlorine in vinyl and fiberglass pools and avoid broadcasting Cal Hypo into these vinyl and fiberglass pools because of the fact that even though it's a powdered form, it can settle on the bottom of a vinyl pool. And by it being on the bottom of the vinyl pool, it can bleach out the vinyl surface very rapidly, in fact, within a few minutes. So you want to make sure that if you are using Cal Hypo in a vinyl pool, you would want to dissolve it completely in a bucket of water before adding it to the pool, or I would advise you not to use Cal Hypo, period, for a vinyl pool. You really can't stain the surface of a fiberglass pool typically with Cal Hypo, but I still wouldn't want it sitting on the bottom of the fiberglass, so I would say liquid chlorine is probably a better choice as well for a fiberglass pool. Since I'm talking surface types here, you can use Cal Hypo perfectly fine in a plaster pool. Sitting on the bottom is not going to do anything to it, and it's perfectly safe to use Cal Hypo in a PebbleTech pool as well. One thing that you can use Cal Hypo for in a PebbleTech pool, here in my area, we get this pretty aggressive algae in PebbleTech pools. It's almost like a black algae, but it's not. It's actually green, and it's like an olive green color when you look at it through the water. And it gets like in between the pebbles, and sometimes you'll have 30 or 40 of these eraser-sized spots in the pool, maybe sometimes even bigger, the size of a dime. And what's great about Cal Hypo is that it's highly effective against this algae type. So what I usually do when I get this kind of aggressive algae in a PebbleTech pool, I'll turn the system off, and I'll get about 3 pounds of Cal Hypo, and I'll broadcast it so it lands on the heads of the algae, leave the pool off for a couple of hours. It's going to dissolve pretty fast. This is more effective when the water temperature is a little bit cooler, but if it's really warm and the water is like 85 degrees, I would probably use 4 pounds of Cal Hypo then. That way you make sure that it settles on top of the heads. This may be a 2 or 3 week process, but you'll notice that over the course of treating the PebbleTech pool with the Cal Hypo, that aggressive green algae goes away. So just a side note that Cal Hypo is highly effective for that. It's not really effective for black algae because it won't sit on top of the black algae long enough to have an effect. That's when you would use the HASA trichloroalgaban, and you can listen to the previous podcast where I talked about the trichlor and that product as well. But Cal Hypo does dissolve pretty rapidly. Another trick with Cal Hypo that I've used is I'll take a Cal Hypo tablet, and let's say you have some pretty aggressive mustard algae on the step area of the pool. What I like to do with the Cal Hypo tablet is break it into little parts, not quite powder, but I'll break it up so that it's more like a granular, and it could be larger granulars. It's not a really big deal. And I'll sprinkle it over the algae on the step area, because sometimes you'll get that really aggressive mustard algae in the steps, and even with a stainless steel brush, it's hard to get in there and brush it out because it's in a corner or right where you can't get that brush in there too well. And I'll just put the Cal Hypo tablet over that and leave it in the pool for, until it dissolves basically, and it will destroy that algae pretty rapidly. So it's another use for Cal Hypo tablets for algae control. I even told the Pool Life folks at the pool show, why don't you make a granular Cal Hypo, and if people can use it for algae control, it would be a great product to have on the market to fight algae. So that's something to consider, for them to consider making, but you can also just hack it and use it the way I use it for algae control in certain areas in the pool. And then, of course, liquid chlorine is really fast acting. I would say it's the fastest acting chlorine out there because you can pour it directly over algae as well, and you can see it reacting really fast. And it also is a great way to, again, shock the pool without clouding up the water. I find that it's probably a little bit more affordable in certain areas over Cal Hypo. Other areas you're going to find Cal Hypo a lot more affordable than liquid chlorine. It's just area dependent. Like Florida, liquid chlorine definitely is much cheaper and less expensive than Cal Hypo, and that's why Florida, of course, is known for those 2.5 gallon jugs of liquid chlorine. Cal Hypo does have a convenience factor because if you have the 1 pound bags of them, they're easy to transport back to pools with your tote or your service cart. Liquid chlorine, of course, has more weight to it in bulk, so the Cal Hypo does have that advantage of being more user-friendly over the liquid chlorine. As far as shelf life, liquid chlorine does have a shorter shelf life. I would say 3 to 6 months. Cal Hypo does have a pretty long shelf life, probably like 2 years. Now I have found old Cal Hypo before. It kind of gets weird looking, kind of mushy, and it doesn't have the same kind of powder kind of texture, more like sand like wet sand after time. And I've used it before in a pool, and it seems to be okay, but it probably is pretty weak at that point. I would say probably 2 years would be as far as I would take Cal Hypo out without it losing some of its strength. Just by nature, it's probably going to lose some strength for that reason. But liquid chlorine is known to degrade over time, and so you want to rotate the stock and use it as soon as you get it, and make sure you don't store too much of it. So it's kind of a product that you're going to have to go out and buy more often. Whereas Cal Hypo, you can get a 50-pound bucket and keep it somewhere for a long period of time. I really like using both of these products. I think there's a reason to use Cal Hypo, and there's a reason to use liquid chlorine. Cal Hypo, again, convenient. Just keep 1 or 2 bags on your tote or in your pool service cart. You're always going to have chlorine at the pool side. Liquid chlorine is great for fast acting and for raising the chlorine level in the pool. And these both will complement trichlor tablets really well. I never would recommend having a pool with just trichlor tablets because then you're adding a lot of cyanuric acid to the water to a point where it becomes hard to maintain it. In the other podcast on trichlor, I did go over Bob Lowry's formula, and I will reiterate the fact that the more cyanuric acid in the water, the higher the free chlorine you're going to need to make it effective. And so if the cyanuric acid is at 150, you're going to need 12 parts per million of free chlorine. The formula is basically 7.5% free chlorine versus the cyanuric acid level. So I'll take the 150 number, I'll times it by 7.5%, and you're going to need 11.25 parts per million, or let's just say 12 parts per million to make it effective. The cyanuric acid level is at 50 parts per million times 7.5%. You're going to need 4 parts per million of free chlorine in that pool. So that is a factor to consider, and that's why I always like a combination approach of using Cal Hypo with trichlor tablets or liquid chlorine with trichlor tablets. So basically how this would work, you would, instead of putting 3 tablets in the floater, you would put 1 tablet in the floater, and then you would add liquid chlorine or Cal Hypo to the pool to raise the free chlorine level up. With the stabilizer in the water and the trichlor tablet dissolving, this is effective in a small pool. If it's a larger pool, 2 tablets, maybe a gallon of liquid chlorine and another gallon later in the week. Or if you're going to want to get away from stabilized chlorine altogether, you can purchase some Cal Hypo tablets to use instead of trichlor, and then you would raise the chlorine level up with the liquid chlorine. I would not recommend Cal Hypo tablets and Cal Hypo shock, because then you're adding double the amount of calcium to the pool, and it's probably not going to be the best if you have hard water in your area. So liquid chlorine definitely has that advantage of not adding calcium to the water. And liquid chlorine, I think the byproduct of salt, is the most benign in the water. Everyone's had saltwater generators on their pool route where the salt cells stop working. The customer doesn't want to do anything, and so there's 3,000 parts per million of salt in the water, and the pool is perfectly fine. But with the calcium at a higher level, you have to adjust the LSI and try to keep the water in balance that way. So it can have a negative effect if you have too much calcium in the water. So that's one advantage liquid chlorine has over Cal Hypo, I should say. You're not adding a byproduct that affects the pool as much. Salt is much better, I would think, in my opinion, to add to the pool than calcium or cyanuric acid with trichlor tablets. Liquid chlorine is also preferable to shock a pool if you have a saltwater pool and you need to bring the chlorine level up. Let's say that the salt cell got dirty and the saltwater generator was not effectively producing chlorine. You don't want to use Cal Hypo because it has calcium and it could affect the plates of the salt cell over time. I would say use liquid chlorine. If you're going to add a little bit of salt to the water anyway, that's perfectly fine with a saltwater pool. And it's the most similar element to the saltwater generator over Cal Hypo. So I definitely would recommend liquid chlorine for a pool with a saltwater generator. Again, liquid chlorine for a fiberglass and vinyl pool over Cal Hypo. And liquid chlorine is a great fast-acting sanitizer shock to the pool. Cal Hypo also works pretty fast, but it can cloud the water up versus liquid chlorine, which doesn't typically cloud the pool water up when you use it. Both of these products have a higher pH than trichlor, of course, much higher because trichlor, the pH is around 2.7 or 3, where the pH of Cal Hypo and of liquid chlorine is higher. So if you're adding a lot of Cal Hypo, of course, you're going to have to add muriatic acid to lower down the pH. Liquid chlorine, not as much, but Cal Hypo does have a pretty high pH, so keep that in mind as well. You may be using more muriatic acid to counter the Cal Hypo, maybe not quite as much with the liquid chlorine, but you're still going to need to balance the pH if you're using either of these as your primary sanitizer over trichlor, which does have acid, which will keep the pH lower in the pool. And one last note about Cal Hypo, since it is a very strong oxidizer, if you pour it directly into a pool, let's say you add 2 pounds directly into the pool, and there is some metal in the water, what's going to happen is that it could actually leave black stains on the bottom of the pool or create black stains. And these could be really large black stains, like the size of softballs. You can have black stains the size of volleyballs on the bottom. So if there are metal ions in the water, like manganese or copper, the strong oxidizing nature of Cal Hypo causes these metals to fall out of solution, and then the stain will appear on the bottom of the pool. Now there's ways to counter this. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but lowering the chlorine level, of course, over time will cause it to be the black stains to come off. Also, a metal sequestering agent will also help remove it. So that's something to keep in mind with Cal Hypo. It's recommended that you dissolve it in a bucket of water before you add it to the pool, which is one added step that, liquid chlorine doesn't have that because it's already liquid. You can just pour it right into the pool. I would say liquid chlorine would also be ideal for commercial pool use because you're not going to cloud up the pool. So if you're at a commercial pool, apartment complex, HOA, you need to bring the chlorine level up to 10 parts per million. Walking around the pool and pouring liquid chlorine is much more effective than Cal Hypo because it's going to cloud the pool water up. So those are something to keep in mind with these 2 different shocks for your pool. And I would consider liquid chlorine a shock as well, even though it's not promoted quite like Cal Hypo is, like the bag doesn't say shock on it or pool shock, but liquid chlorine can be used in the same way to shock the pool because shocking the pool is just a method. It's not basically a product. It's just bringing the chlorine level up rapidly in the pool, and liquid chlorine does do that, as well as Hypo. If you're looking for other podcasts, you can find those on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com, by clicking on the podcast icon on the banner. You can also find episodes if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I put a new episode up every Monday through Friday. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.